Lovely to talk to you always, but particularly on this occasion. In my intro, I gave everyone your job titles and what you do here at the Cats, but if you could give us a little bit more info, a little bit more on your backgrounds, careers, experiences, what's led you to this seat right here, right now. How about you first, Bianca, in honour of it being International Women's Day?
Why not? Thanks, Meg. So you may have given the title of General Manager Marketing, Digital and Comms, is that correct?
That's the one.
So my day-to-day is really focused on everything we do from a marketing perspective across the club for all of our programs, for our brands, creating new brands and exciting brands and disruptive brands like we did with our AFLW program last year when we launched She's Football, which was a really important message we wanted to get out there and very relevant to the conversation that we're having today, that there is still inequality and equity in sport. And whilst, there's a future that we want to get to where that isn't the case, we still recognise that it is. And so for us to have She's Football as a stake in the ground was really important when we launched that brand, to say that she too does belong on the field. So my work is all about creating brands, creating inclusion with everything that we do, bringing our members, the community into the conversations and with our players. What led me to the seat here, I've always worked in media and marketing creative agencies, and I have a big background in sport, not the same success that you have over here, Skip, but I've always loved playing various different sports. So it was a dream for me to be able to marry those two passions with marketing, which is what I love, alongside sport as well. So I feel very privileged to be at the club.
I was sure to mention the touch in the intro as well, just so you know. It's on there. It's on there. All right, over to Brett, BJ, Jono.
Thanks,
we're going with
Meg.
Brett today, very profesh.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me this afternoon. I guess, my path to the Cats, going right back, I'm from WA originally, so was drafted to the Hawks in 1999, which is a fair time ago now. Managed to play 4 years at the Hawks and then was traded to Carlton, had a couple of years there. So got to experience, I guess, what it was like to have a very different experience at two clubs. And I think that's helped shape some of my thinking around football programs and helping players maximise their careers in the game. Once I finished playing AFL footy, I had 6 years in the second tier playing for Williamstown. Really enjoyed that experience. And then I had a bit of an itch to scratch around coaching, so I ended up coaching a local footy club in the Eastern Footy League for about 5 years, which I really enjoyed. So I got to experience, community football and what that entails. And whilst I was doing all that, managed to try and study. My parents were really big on that when I was younger. So studied physio. It took me 7 years to finish a physio degree. Ended up working as a physio for a couple of years. And then really wanted to get back into the foot industry and give back. Ended up getting a role at the Players Association. I think at the time it was Transition Services Manager, so helping all players exit the game and try and help them with their next steps. And then was promoted, Matt Finnis was CEO at the time, to the executive where I was General Manager of Player Development. So that was all about, trying to drive that agenda across the competition. And then, was keen to get back into clubland and was fortunate enough to land a role here at the Cats. And initially it was in the men's program as Performance and Development Manager, so looking after medical, strength and conditioning, player development. I was helping Simon Lloyd with the leadership program as well. And then, what is it now? Probably 18 months ago. It's gone really quick. I was offered the opportunity to head up the women's program, and I've loved it. Really in a privileged position, and only just getting started. I think it's grown a lot since I've first entered the role, and to get involved at the early stages. I think it was at the start of season 5, and now we're at the end of season 7. So, and it's privileged position and loving my time at the Cats.
Stoked to have you, as I also said in the intro. So thanks for both covering off those 2 points. I thought we'd go back, Bianca, if you're happy to speak about it. I was wondering how aware you were of your girlhood or womanhood growing up. Did you feel like it impacted your hopes, dreams, ambitions, things you participated in, or did you just crack on?
Crack on. How much time do we have? Because this is not a spring chicken anymore. I was very aware, I think, and there's a few people around the club that have heard this story and remind me that they've heard this story many times. But growing up, as I said, I loved to play sport. I still play a lot of sport now, but there wasn't a lot of girls' teams when I was growing up. You would be very well aware, being an AFLW player yourself. And so I played with all the boys. I played with my brother on his baseball team. I've done everything that I could do to still continue to play sport. So I think that drive and that passion led me to where I am today, and again in a position at the club where I can help increase the marketing platform of the women's program, I think is really important. So I think, growing up and having to play in boys' teams just so I could play sport has shaped the way I've always tried to think about equality and what we could be doing better and more to ensure that, females do have the same opportunities that men do as well. And it's okay if those things look different, but equal in different ways. I think growing up doing that, even to this day, I still remember I was playing at a local tennis club here, and not to say I'm very good at tennis, but I would beat all of the other women substantially, and asked if perhaps I could go and join the men's team, or we could grade on ability, not gender, and that was very quickly shut down. So I still think there's a long way to go in terms of, getting that equality that we're striving for. And I think, having grown up and experienced it, not to the same level that someone like yourself has, but just that constant divide. I see it in schools now. You've girls kick programs, but you've got the boys over here and the girls over here. And I was like, why can't we all just play together? So I think that was a big part of growing up and understanding that, yes, I am a female and a woman, but that doesn't mean I can't do the same things or better things than my male counterparts. Not looking at you, Jono, when I say that. So I think, those experiences really shaped who I am today and what I'm looking to do and looking to deliver in this role as well at the club.
And how about today, and being a woman executive in a sort of traditionally male-dominated industry? Have you felt that have you ever internalized some of that divide, or do you feel it's, are you conscious of it day to day in the rooms and the spaces that you enter in your current job?
I look at it from two different perspectives. I think I'm very privileged to come into a club that is led by an executive team that is conscious of this, that it's not male-dominated. It's not putting females in seats just for the sake of it. There's purpose and reasoning behind it. And I was hired for this job because I have a very different skill set to football in a way. But sometimes I do think I sit back and I go, oh, should I have an opinion on football because I haven't had that same experience in football? But then I have to check myself and go, hang on, no, you were brought in for a skill set that brings more diversity to the football program. And, as I've got my bright pink shoes on, something different to a traditionally male-dominated space. So I need to constantly remember that I might not have the huge background in football. I may not have played like a lot of people downstairs in the football program, but that's okay because I bring something different to the table that's unique. Bit out there at times, but that's okay. Just remember that I bring value in a different way. That's not typically what a football club has had.
Yeah, I think we'll get to discussing that further a bit later on when we speak about the theme, which calls for us to, embrace the unique skill set of women. But to go back to you, Brett, I'm keen for you to talk about how you felt when you were first approached about the job in the women's program.
Yeah, I was question. I was really excited and nervous at the same time because I was really excited about the fact that I get to head up a women's football program, help players maximise their careers in the game, something I'm really passionate about. But I was nervous at the same time because I was really aware that I had no experience in AFLW. I'm a male heading up a women's program, and I knew that my leadership was going to get challenged and tested because I needed to, understand the context first and not just assert what the program should or shouldn't look like. There was things that I needed to put in place to test and, before just, making assumptions myself. So I was really conscious of that. But I guess, my first impressions of the program was that, the athletes were just so passionate about the game and, super committed and had this kind of really great connection with the community as well. And so I was in straight away, you know, and I've loved working with the players and staff for that reason. There were things at the time when I first started that kind of stood out, and I think it was coming out of COVID as well, that the position and profile of the women's team at the club probably wasn't where it needed to be. And we've certainly evolved and grown in a short space of time. But, you know, things like, you know, whether it be just social media mentions or appearances at events or whatever it may be, it was really important that we needed to expand that space. And, you know, the work that Bianca's doing and her team have been fantastic for that in terms of helping elevate the profile of the women's team. So I guess getting back to your question, I was super excited and nervous at the same time because I knew I wouldn't have all the answers.
Yeah. I'm shocked when you said 18 months. It feels like it's been a lot. We've fit a lot of progress, thankfully, but also quite a few seasons into that time. And you're right. To hear it's just getting going is exciting. You speak about Bianca's influence and the space that you lead up. The theme for this year speaks to innovation and the power of women in STEM to make sure we're innovating for the future. Can you speak to us about the power of that, or the importance of innovation and tech in driving a more gender equal future?
Yeah, I think there's still a very long way to go in terms of representation, not just of females, but, you know, underrepresented minorities in the tech and digital space. I think that there's great opportunity to get more diversity of thought. Like anything, I think the more people you bring into it that have had different experiences or come at it from a different angle, it just makes things more powerful, more exciting. You can be more disruptive because you're not just looking at it from a single lens. So I think that it's an incredibly exciting space that we're looking to push more and more into. But it's, again, making sure that you do have that diversity of thought, that richness of creativity. I always say to the team that great ideas don't necessarily just have to come from our team. Like, everyone can have a great idea. It's where you're sourcing that, where you're getting that opinion, where you're getting that diversity of thought. So I think in the tech and digital space, it will only continue to grow as you add more voices into the mix that do give you that different perspective. And that can be a little bit disruptive because what Jono views of the world versus what you view versus what I view are all very different, and they're all very valid, but they all bring a different perspective. So I think in this space in particular, knowing how underrepresented females and other minorities are in this space, it'll only continue to get richer the more we can have different voices.
Yeah. Jono, you yourself don't mind a bit of data, a bit of tech.
Yeah, yep.
And I know you've done some amazing work in the strategy space for our program. How do you see data, or sort of perhaps the lack of it, shaping the space for us?
Yeah, I think it also comes down to, I guess to B's point too, developing a system that improves innovation and decision making. And I think there's kind of three key drivers to that. There's kind of an important structure driver. Do you have the right rewards and incentives in place, the right meeting structures and design? Resources is the next driver. Are we allocating resources, properly to things that matter most? And then what's the culture and environment around innovation? And, to the leaders at the footy club, are they okay with people experimenting and taking risks? And so I think what tends to happen is sometimes when you might have a goal in relation to the business plan and people come up with an innovation or an idea, and for whatever reason it doesn't work, but we fail too fast and simply just kind of give up on it, whether that be in relation to diversity and inclusion or gender equality, rather than thinking about what was the process design like, and what did we learn from that to be able to, is there a spin-off idea that we can try? So I think what happens then is it kind of ingrains this kind of old thinking and reinforces kind of the status quo a little bit. So I think it's also, about developing that system and making sure we have those drivers in place to encourage innovation and new ideas.
Yeah, that was sort of going to be my next question. And to you, B, as a member of the executive team, as we look to go forwards and we've got, big, bold, exciting plans, of course, one of the risks is that if we build them in the image of, the current inequality, that we can risk further embedding it. How do you think we how can we avoid that? How can we imagine, that future that doesn't quite exist yet?
I think if you do, as Jono said, just keep doing the same things the same ways, then you're not going to get a different result. So I think it's important, again, we do have these big business plans as a club and we do have these big aspirations, but it's not just up to the executive to drive that. It needs to be a whole of club approach. And I think that's where you start to uncover opportunities where you can have more, again, going back to diversity of thought, different opinions, different experiences. I think you just need to be open to the idea that anyone and everyone can be involved. And that, to Jono's point earlier, it's okay to fail forward, and that's a learning that we can take and we can move forward with, and we're not always going to get it right. There are things that we'll do well and things that we won't do well, but I think it's just being open and transparent with the staff around where we're looking to go, but knowing that we need everyone on board to get there with us, because if you go back to doing the things that you've always done from a top-down approach, I think you just get really narrow in your thinking and you get to a point where maybe we've thought too much about AFL for too long, so how do we bring more AFLW into that conversation and our VFLW program, and just look at it with openness and a clean slate to go, we've got great things that work, but could they be better? We don't have these things over here, so how do we start to introduce them? So I think it's just being open to the possibility of doing stuff differently and being okay that sometimes we will fail, but that's a risk we're willing to take because we want to be disruptive, we want to do things differently, and we want to ensure that we're not getting back to a point where we're being too diverse and then losing that inclusion part that we're looking for. So I think it's a balance of both.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think so often in this space, we run into people who are fearing getting it wrong, and that can be one of the biggest hurdles to advancement in the first place. So we've got to remind ourselves to go for it in many instances.
Yeah.
I think also too, just in relation to the women's game, is thinking about the ecosystem and what are the metrics that we need to build around it to be able to demonstrate progress, to, I guess, have an evidence base around, this is why we need more funding, and we need to tip more resources into it. So I think data plays a real critical role in demonstrating that.
Yeah. For a lot of us, this sort of advancement and progress, particularly across the last 10 years, is to some degree plain to see. We now have the existence of a women's program at the club and an AFLW league. You're someone who's been at AFL level or involved in AFL since before women's football was at that national level. Is there anything that you can point to as having been a catalyst for the change and for the continued progress?
I think the competition... I think it's now more visible, which is great, and I wouldn't underestimate the impact that you've had, Meg. And I think the athletes are the heroes and role models, and do a fantastic job. And even yourself, Meg, who has been involved in the game for a long time, have probably been around and seen some of the mistakes, and that's where I think our relationship's fantastic, and then I can learn from that. And it's important that we do, and I'm aware around that. So I think that the competition itself being now more visible, but then the athletes themselves being the real heroes and role models for mine.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for saying so, but I also think, like I tried to say earlier, the current crop of athletes, we've got to continue to remain cognizant of the fact that women's football existed before us and before we got to pull on the hoops, and hopefully
pioneers who
absolutely, the pioneers, and sometimes when you're feeling exhausted by the challenges or you've got a lot on, you can that drive to progress things can take a back seat sometimes, and you're thinking you fall into the risk of being like, we've made it, here we are playing in a national competition, but when you do have the energy and in the off season or before and after, whenever you get the chance to continue to push the envelope on certain things. And, I look at my younger teammates and occasionally there's envy that I think, gosh, you're going to enjoy a career that's so much more advanced than my own. And then I think, no, you were able to be here for the beginning, and plenty of women played the sport before I did and haven't had the chance to play at this level.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I learned at the Players Association. You've also got to recognise you're part of a larger playing group.
Yeah.
And it's on every athlete and player to leave the game in better shape than when you entered it. And I think, it's how do you fast track that education with some of those younger players?
Yeah.
Yeah.
V, we touched before on celebrating the unique skills of women. So can we speak for a moment about, recognising difference and celebrating it and helping it and I guess that celebration driving us forwards?
I think, to Jono's point earlier, and what we've always tried to do, well, since I started, is that celebration, is that recognition, is that constant visibility of our AFLW, VFLW players, the staff here. I think I read an article a fair few years ago now, but still very relevant to this day, around, we talk a lot about equal pay in sport, but I actually think it's equal marketing that needs to happen first, because you do need, I'd love, and I'm sure they do already, for a little kid to walk down the street and go, oh, that's Joel Selwood, but to have that same impact with you, oh, that's Meg Mac. So for me, I think the more we can celebrate the diversity of what females bring to sport, bring to, upstairs here, downstairs in football, out on the field, is really important for the success and continued success of the program. As you just spoke about, how good might your younger teammates have it down the track, but I think, you could look back and reflect on it's not as easy now, but, we pushed hard, we drove hard, we celebrated the small wins to allow them to have that opportunity in the future. So I think, it's important to celebrate the uniqueness, the diversity. As I said earlier, it doesn't have to look the same as AFL. It could look completely different, but as long as we're giving you and the teammates and broader females across the business the same opportunities to be more visible, to share their own stories, I think that's really important.
You say it doesn't have to look the same, and I know, Brett, you've done a power of work in setting up the program to cater for our unique needs. Are you able to speak, to your priorities in that sense?
Yeah, I think certainly at the end of season 5, I think we started to turn the corner around, starting to understand what the unique requirements of the women's game are, and then adapt quickly and accordingly, rather than simply trying to, drop a men's program onto a women's program. It doesn't make sense. And so we're kind of thinking about it across, 3 or 4 different areas, but certainly from a list management perspective, it's different. There's 30 players on a list compared to 45. It's a shorter season. There's 16 on the ground versus 18 in the men's game. So how do you think about list management differently? From a game style and coaching methods point of view, again, the game itself is different. It's live a lot more. There's a lot more contests. So what does your game style need to look like, and how do you coach that? From an S&C perspective, I think, particularly around ACL injuries, that's been a bit of an issue for the competition, and there's certainly a number of reasons for that. So how do we cater for that in our program to safeguard our athletes? Women's health in relation to that, trying to working with the athletes to understand, symptoms around their menstrual cycle, and how do we help reduce those symptoms. So supporting their health is really important. And then from a player development perspective, I mean, it's such a large off season, and there's so much uncertainty still in the women's game. So how do we help players navigate that uncertainty? So there's so many different areas, I guess, we've looked at to think about it differently too. And I think we've started on that path, and we've still got a way to go, but we're certainly heading in the right direction now.
Yeah, I think so much of, legit inclusion and diversity is, seeing people, hearing people, and having them feel valued in that way. So to have a program that caters for those needs is so essential to women feeling part of this footy club and feeling like it values, us as much as we do it. So that's been a fantastic development, as you say, over the past 2 seasons. Let's talk about the opportunity gender inequality presents us with. So UN Women Australia Chair Georgie Williams said that gender inequality is not an unsolvable problem. In fact, it's a true opportunity which, when harnessed, releases incredible productivity, intellectual capital and international competitive advantage. Is the pursuit of gender equality a path towards greatness for us at Geelong? And is it a chance for us to gain competitive advantage across the competition?
100%. And if I think about what greatness means to each individual is different. And if I recall a Nike quote, if I can remember it properly, greatness isn't found in one special place or person. Greatness is where someone is trying to find it. And I think that's really beautiful in everyone has a different pursuit of what greatness looks like. And obviously here at the club, we have our own definition of greatness. But I think, the small things that we already do as a club organically, like having the men's program and the women's program training together. Like, it's the simple things that I think will give us that competitive advantage, where we're looking at greatness not as a men's team or a females team, but what can Georgie Prasparkas learn from Tom Atkins, and then vice versa, what can Tom Atkins learn from Georgie Prasparkas. So I think, in our pursuit of greatness for Geelong, and the things that we're doing that doesn't separate or segment men versus women, will allow us to have that competitive advantage over others who are probably a bit more rooted in the traditional way of doing things. I think we're already on that path of just doing it differently, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, but be open to the opportunity of doesn't have to be how we've always done it.
Yeah.
Whatever path greatness is for someone could be completely different than what it's been before.
Yeah. How about you, Jono? Where do you think the opportunity lies?
Yeah, no, I agree with B. It's exciting. I also think the opportunities in leadership and having self-aware leaders, because I think if you're more self-aware as a leader, you are more objective, and therefore if you're more objective, you have more choices. And I think leadership is all about choices and helping others make good choices. And I think if you aren't self-aware, we're just going to, I guess, keep the status quo, not do things differently, as you were saying, B. And that's a trap, which doesn't help us progress forwards as a footy club and get that competitive advantage. And I know, even speaking before about my own example, moving into the women's program, that was what was tested for me, my leadership and how self-aware was I. And I think the exciting part is that, and not to be, I guess, scared of it, is developing as a leader in that regard. And I think that's being curious and always wanting to explore that and develop as a leader is going to be critical in making sure that we get a competitive advantage in this space going forward.
Yeah. All right, as much as we think that everyone could listen to us speak on this subject all day long, we're going to wrap it up with one final, maybe a little dual question. How do we keep motivating people around gender equality? I think we hear a lot of it's the right thing to do, but I don't know if that generally motivates people, or if we have to begin to see it as everything we've discussed, a competitive advantage, essentially great for all your results, the more diverse you are.
Yeah, look, I think it's not going to change overnight, but we need to continually push those boundaries because, as you said, not just the right thing to do, but the opportunities, the possibilities it creates by doing things differently and by leading by example, I think is what we try to do here at the club, and a great way to demonstrate what blossoms and what you create when you do have more of that representation across the club, across, to Jono's point, he's in an AFLW program, like that is different, but it brings diversity of thought, and he then can learn from you as well. So I think it's about, just being open to learning, to understanding and listening, as you said, to different voices and different people. And it's the right thing to do, yes, but also I think we just need to continually lead by example to reinforce. It's not about what you're taking away, it's about what you're actually creating, and that could be quite beautiful.
Yeah, well said. Any parting words, Jono?
I think leading by example, I think is key. I actually listened to a podcast recently.
Speaking of podcasts.
And it was actually Emma Watson's speech. I think it was at a UN conference. And
we love Emma.
Yeah, and she said that all that is needed for the forces of evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me. It encourages, I guess, us all to step forward and be seen and lead by example. I think that's the opportunity, and
And I think, the thing that we've got to end on, of course, is, a recognition that while we try and make advancements for ourselves, we've got to make sure that we bring everyone along with us and ensure that, equality for everyone is quite some way off, but that it's, owned by everyone. And just because we experience certain opportunities doesn't mean that everyone does, and that we have to continue to work until that's so. So thank you both for not only for coming on today, but also for all the work that you do and that you've discussed today. It's a pleasure to work with you and an exciting journey we're on.
Thanks
For having us, Meg.